Welcome, everybody, to News 1900 for all your news about the 18th century. In tonight's story, President Theodore Roosevelt has been causing quite a ruckus in the business world. He's been splitting up monopolistic companies through the use of the Sherman Antitrust Act, which has never before been used for so-called trust busting. It's been an unpleasant surprise for big businesses. I had a talk with him earlier, and this is what he had to say. Mr. President, thank you for coming on the show.
Why, of course. I love News 1900. You always give a fresh take on the stories.
Now, I'd like to start this by asking, why you? No other president before you had even shown interest in taking on what you call bad trusts.
Companies who pursue profits over the well-being of their customers. They will drive the common man to abject poverty if it means more money in their pockets. And while I believe in the spirit of capitalism, making money with morality should be at the forefront of one's mind. There are plenty of trusts that provide good quality services at reasonable prices. But there are also trusts that will exploit their customers to get what they want. If a company has grown bloated with greed, I believe it is my duty to disband them, dissolve them.
Has any company ever tried to stop you from splitting them up?
That cheeky bugger, J.P. Morgan, thought I was one of his business rivals. He thought I was some sort of tycoon that could be bargained with to split up his Northern Securities Company. I told him that no one, no matter how rich or powerful, is above the law. Thanks to my Attorney General, that trust has been split up, and other ones like U.S. Steel have gone scattering apart to avoid my wrath.
Now, I understand you've also taken steps to give the federal government regulatory power over large trusts.
Yes, they have increased the power of the Interstate Commerce Commission. I have also pushed through the Elkins Act and the Hepburn Act.
Now, what exactly did those do?
Well, the Elkins Act has stopped railroads from using rebates to hurt the common man, and the Hepburn Act has allowed the ICC to look into railroads and make sure they aren't price gouging. Now, these acts alone have not broken up trusts altogether, but they have revitalized the jolly old Sherman Antitrust Act, and I hope that successive presidents will continue to break up the trusts.
Speaking of the common man, you recently helped solve the anthracite coal strike. Could you tell us about that?
Well, that was a difficult decision. You see, at first I wanted the company and the union to handle it themselves, but after coal prices had skyrocketed due to low supply, well, I had to step in, as a winter without coal means death for thousands. I had to make a brute force decision. I brought the company owners and the union reps to the White House, and after some ugly debates, we settled on a commission, a go-between for the company and the union. As neither I nor the company wanted to formally recognize the union, but negotiations had to be made. The commission allowed the workers and the company to negotiate a 9-hour workday and a pay raise.
That's great, Mr. President. Truly great. Thank you for your time.
No problem. Anytime.
And now over to a reporter from the future. Phil, how'd everything turn out?
Well, Liam, old Teddy sure did put a lot of work into breaking trusts. In the end, he brought 44 lawsuits intended to break up bad trusts, with the Northern Securities Company being the most well-known busted trust. William Howard Taft, the president who succeeded Roosevelt, brought 70 lawsuits to court and finished lawsuits against Standard Oil and the American Tobacco Company that Roosevelt had began. And through his passing of the Elkins Act and Hepburn Acts, Roosevelt began the trend of federal government regulating and companies to ensure fair treatment of customers. Taft, the market is at least less dominated by huge companies, which are regulated by federal government to ensure consumers aren't exploited.
Wow, that ended up being way shorter than our writers meant it to be. Now, to hopefully prevent our producers from firing us, it's me, Liam, with the after show, wrapping up the news with a not-so-quick summary. Were the end result of laissez-faire capitalism. As companies fought each other for dominance of their market, some would rise to the top and merge to form a monopoly and gain complete control over their market. They could set their prices to whatever they pleased, because there was no other company to go to for their product. Trusts, as the people began to refer to all monopolies as, also wielded great political power, and some protesters went as far as to accuse them of buying votes in the Senate and House, which may have been true. People began to change their views of trust owners from paragons of the American dream to robber barons, especially as trusts became ever more dominant and wealth became more concentrated in the hands of the rich. Teddy Roosevelt had some very interesting views on trusts. As we stated before, he didn't really have a problem with the idea of a monopoly as long as it was run well. He separated trusts into two categories, good trusts and bad trusts. Good trusts were those that provided good services for good prices and could be left alone, while bad trusts were those that exploited their control of the market and to hike up prices to unreasonable heights and had to be destroyed. He also hated the trust tycoons who considered themselves more powerful than the government, and he wanted to take them down a peg. To achieve his goal of breaking up the bad trusts, Teddy used the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, which declared all organizations that would restrain trade illegal. Before Teddy, it had mainly been used in support of big business by breaking up unions. But Teddy used it with great effect in the manner it was supposed to be used, that is, breaking up trusts, most notably in breaking up J.P. Morgan's Northern Securities Company, which had near total control over railroads. The Elkins Act and the Hepburn Act further regulated the power of railroads. The Elkins Act gave the Interstate Commerce Commission, or ICC, the power to fine railroads who gave rebates that favored certain companies over others. That's known as preferential treatment. The Hepburn Act gave the ICC the power to set maximum railroad rates, which furthered Teddy's goal of eliminating preferential treatment on the railroad by these bad trusts. After the anthracite coal strike, Teddy created the Department of Commerce and Labor, which had the task of investigating trusts to make sure that they were behaving as a good trust would, which would be not abusing their workers or setting exorbitant rates of prices. Now, while Teddy busted 44 trusts, created the ICC Acts and the Department of Commerce and Labor, and helped solve the anthracite coal strike, much of his lasting effects were in getting the ball rolling, so to speak. Teddy's trust busting didn't end the dominion of huge companies or even really curb their power, and Taft busted far more trusts than Teddy. The Elkins and Hepburn Acts were watered down by Teddy's enemies in Congress, and while certainly helpful, they did not end the control and abuses of railroad companies. But while Teddy couldn't single-handedly destroy the evils of monopolies, he was the first to try, and he blazed the path for the century of progress that was made possible by his efforts.
My name's a 21 man.
Now over to our reporter from the future, Phil. How did everything turn out?
Quite horribly. Old Teddy sure did put a lot of work into breaking up trusts. In the end, he brought 44 lawsuits intended to break up the bad lawsuits
Is this hard
with
for you, Phil?
the Northern Securities Company and the most well-known busted trust, William Howard Taft. I can't see the script, but
I may not have been recording.
oh my gosh.
Now over
And the Hepburn Act has